The Athletic.
G'day there and welcome along to the race F1 briefing for Sunday the 23rd of June 2024. Brought to you by the Singapore Grand Prix, the home of Formula One night racing. I'm James Baldwin and this is the podcast that brings you all of the big F1 headlines you need to know in 15 minutes or less. It was race day in Spain, so let's get into it. Max Verstappen took a narrow victory over an ultimately deflated Lando Norris in the 2024 Spanish Grand Prix in a race that was defined by McLaren's choice of an offset strategy, which almost paid off. Norris secured his first pole position in 3 years on Saturday and led the field away on new soft tyres. But his launch from pole was poor, and while he attempted to keep Verstappen from getting by into turn 1, it was George Russell who snatched the lead from 4th on the grid. Norris, meanwhile, fell behind Verstappen to 3rd. Behind them, Charles Leclerc's quick getaway was immediately halted as he had to brake hard to avoid Norris at the start, and he failed to make up any ground. Carlos Sainz soon passed his fellow Ferrari driver, but left the track at turn 1. He used the runoff road and rejoined the track behind the bollard, complying with the rules, and therefore escaped penalty. However, at the start of lap 3, Verstappen used his hefty DRS advantage to snatch the lead off of Russell and retain it after a very brief wheel-to-wheel skirmish through the opening turn. Verstappen built up an advantage of more than 1 second over Russell by the end of that lap, and it seemed that the championship leader had another straightforward victory ahead of him, but McLaren's choice of strategy would put that in doubt. Of the lead group, Russell and Sainz were the first to pit from soft to mediums on lap 16, with Hamilton following suit 1 lap later. Of that group, Sainz won out, managing to emerge between the Mercedes, but Hamilton soon passed him on lap 19 after the pair banged wheels. Verstappen then pitted, covering the Mercedes and Sainz and emerging well ahead of that group, with a 1.9 second stop on lap 18. This did little to tempt Norris and Leclerc, who continued to lap on their starting soft compounds. Norris finally pitted on lap 24, emerging 6th, and Leclerc followed suit 1 lap later to emerge 7th. Norris quickly gained on Sainz ahead and made easy work of the Spanish driver, then stalked Hamilton. But Russell proved harder work as they battled through the opening corners on lap 35. Norris passed the Mercedes at turn 3 before Russell retaliated around the following corner. Lando secured second place by switching back through the inside of turn 5 and out-dragging George up the following hill. Verstappen was 9 seconds ahead of the McLaren driver, but Norris soon brought that deficit down to less than 6. With his lead being carved into and Norris threatening to enter undercut range, Verstappen took the chance to pit for softs on lap 45. Norris came in for softs 3 laps later, and he stayed just ahead of Russell when leaving the pits. Norris now had 8 seconds to claw back if he was to win the Grand Prix in a straight fight against Verstappen. The Dutchman was told that his rival Britain was churning through his soft tyres in an attempt to catch up, and Norris was quickly reeling in the deficit. With 10 laps remaining, Norris was 5.5 seconds behind the championship leader. That deficit soon became harder to handle, but Norris got it down to 4.3 seconds with 5 laps left. On the final lap, the gap between Norris and Verstappen was just 2.5 seconds, and the Dutchman took his 7th win of the season by 2.2 seconds. Verstappen's quick start and rapid first pit stop might have been the crucial factors for Red Bull today, as it didn't show a clear pace advantage over McLaren in Spain. Norris took second with the fastest lap, but was deflated over the radio as he crossed the finish line. "I should have won. Effed up the start." Hamilton, meanwhile, secured the final podium spot, having pitted for softs with 22 laps to go before passing Sainz and then his Mercedes teammate Russell for 3rd place. Russell took 4th with a final stint on hard tyres, while Leclerc settled for 5th, just 4 tenths behind the Mercedes with a similar strategy to Norris, underlining Ferrari's relative struggles this weekend. Sainz opted for hard tyres for his 3rd stint and took 6th. Speaking of Ferrari, tensions ran high between Leclerc and Sainz after the race. Charles Leclerc feels Carlos Sainz disobeyed a pre-race order, a suggestion that prompted Sainz to say too many times he complains after the race about something. The two have enjoyed a reasonably harmonious relationship during their 4 seasons as Ferrari teammates, but things were arguably tenser than ever in the aftermath of the Barcelona race. Leclerc and Sainz maintained their 5th and 6th places at the start of the Grand Prix, but Sainz soon set his sights on Leclerc and ended up harrying his SF24 right around the outside of Leclerc's at turn 1. Sainz inched ahead, but was forced to take the runoff and negotiate the mandatory rejoin bollards. That still earned him 5th place, and a brief message from race control noting the incident quickly turned to no further investigation. That prompted immediate ire from Leclerc over the team radio, and his anger with Sainz had not cooled by the time he faced the media. We had a clear strategy at the beginning of the race with the team to both save tyres to attack later on, explained eventual 5th place finisher Leclerc. Carlos on that lap, he didn't do any saving in turn 14 and of course had an opportunity to overtake in turn 1, which is a bit of a shame because we lost time between us. I damaged my front wing because of Carlos making the turn, not seeing that I was on the inside, and that made our race more difficult. But it wouldn't have changed significantly the end result. When asked if he expected Sainz to leave more room, Leclerc said, "Yeah, but again, I didn't understand the point of doing that when it was clearly stated before the race that we had to save in this part of the race. It's a bit unnecessary, but I also understand that it's his home race and it's also an important moment of his career. So I guess he wanted to do something a bit spectacular, but I probably wasn't the right person to do that with." That important moment refers to this being crunch time for Sainz's future beyond 2025 as he is being replaced by Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari. Leclerc told Sky Sports F1, "I think he'll see the image and understand I was on the inside and he couldn't turn in at that point. But when Sky put that to Sainz, he was less than impressed. It's too many times he complains after the race about something," said Sainz, who completed a longer final stint on hards and was 6th. "I was on the attack. We were on a new soft. Mercedes were on a used soft. We had to go on the attack on the first laps when you have new tyre and pass them. Like we said even before the race. I passed Charles because I don't know if he did a mistake or was just managing a bit too much. Then I went on and nearly passed Lewis, and I undercut Lewis, nearly passed Russell at pit stops. I was trying to try what I have to as a driver, what is required for me as a driver to do. He had to manage more. In the end for him, it kind of paid because he beat me at the end with a soft, medium, soft tyre strategy. I elected to be aggressive, soft, medium, hard, and it didn't pay off. It is what it is." Leclerc's frustration was also put to Ferrari team boss Fred Vasseur, who doubted Leclerc and Sainz's duel was massively costly and urged caution when reading too much into the driver's immediate comments. "I think you can find 10 examples of 10 circumstances in the race where we missed half a second," Vasseur said. After Carlos let him go, Sainz obeyed a team order to let Leclerc pass into a net 5th place very easily later on. We missed a couple of tenths during 2 or 3 laps. Let us discuss and let's not draw conclusions after the first comments of the driver when he's just jumped out of the car. It's tricky to not draw conclusions though when Leclerc and Sainz comments stand out in so many years of civil fighting for podiums and the occasional victory. Think how calmly Leclerc reacted to Sainz's brutally tough defence of 3rd at Monza last year. Sainz wouldn't refer to the other times Leclerc has complained after the race if there wasn't at least an element of lingering frustration there. And the fact Sainz is being let go by the team despite claiming 2 of its last 3 wins, the looming self-imposed crunch time to decide his future, and Ferrari's drop-off in form over the last 2 weekends is only going to add to the frustration.
The Race F1 Briefing.
We'll get back to our race recap in just a moment, but first of all, I want to give another shout out to the home of Formula One night racing, the Singapore Grand Prix. Nowhere embraces a Grand Prix weekend quite like Singapore. When the teams and drivers are in town, there's a buzz wherever you go. But what makes the Singapore Grand Prix such a winner for visitors is that when the racing finishes, your trip need not. There's still an amazing city and surrounding area to explore. If that sounds tempting, there are still single and 3-day tickets available for the 2024 race, with prices starting at 128 Singapore dollars. Just head to singaporegp.sg to make your selection and book your place at one of the sporting events of the year. The Singapore Grand Prix. Nothing else comes close. Now we'll take a quick look at what happened behind the top 4 teams. Alpine enjoyed a turn of pace in Spain, with Pierre Gasly qualifying 7th and his teammate Esteban Ocon 8th. The pair enjoyed similar soft, medium, hard strategies and finished 9th and 10th respectively. Gasly lost out to Red Bull's Perez right at the end of the race, but 8th place of Perez marks another poor weekend, and he's just added 2 points to Red Bull's total in Spain. Ocon's 10th place was all but guaranteed well before the checkered flag, as even though Haas's Nico Hülkenberg was gaining in the final stages, the German driver had a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. That consecutive double points finish boosts Alpine up to 7th in the Constructors' Championship ahead of Haas. Home hero Fernando Alonso was anonymous, as he finished a lonely 12th ahead of Sauber's Zhou Guanyu, whilst Lance Stroll capped a pointless weekend for Aston Martin in 14th. Despite bringing a major upgrade package to Spain, RB finished without points, as Daniel Ricciardo took 15th and Yuki Tsunoda 19th. Valtteri Bottas finished 16th ahead of Haas's Kevin Magnussen, who copped a 5-second penalty early on for a false start. Williams struggled for pace and balance in Spain, with Alex Albon going off track on his way to 18th and Logan Sargent well off the field in last place. Well, that's it for this episode and week of racing at the Spanish Grand Prix, and it's also it for me and the Race F1 briefing. It's been an absolute pleasure to have joined you across each race of the season so far and help bring this podcast to life. A big thanks to the editorial team for their consistent help, especially Josh, Jack, and Matt. But the biggest thanks must go to Johnny Reynolds, who is the man behind all of the greatness that you hear across the podcast spectrum at the race. This was his baby, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have lent my voice and production to it to get it where it is today. Thank you, Johnny. I really do appreciate you. I'm moving on to focus on my TV work here in Australia. So if you're down here, you might just see my face or hear my voice on a motorsport broadcast very soon. But never fear, this podcast isn't going anywhere. And to take in more from the weekend, make sure you tune into our big sibling podcast, the Race F1 podcast. But from me, for the last time, I'm James Baldwin, and this has been the Race F1 briefing, brought to you by the Singapore Grand Prix, the home of Formula One night racing.
The Athletic.